Hello everyone and welcome back for one last Q&A video of 2019. The folks on this tier of the Patreon campaign were kind enough to indulge me and just give me questions that pertain to best of the decade. So that's what we've got on the table today. Questions from Evan, Luke, Billy, and Ian, and they're good ones. Let's kick it off with Evan's question. What are the films of this decade that have most influenced your own life and how? It was not easy to narrow down this list here because probably goes without saying, but movies are a big deal in my life. So many have had a major effect on me, but I've picked 4 that maybe are a little extra special in that department, beginning with Hunger Games here. So Hunger Games was a big deal because 1, I really liked the books. 2, I really liked the entire series of movies, but when that first movie was getting super hot in the news cycle, not even when it came out, I mean before, when casting was going on, I worked at a couple of outlets where I was the only one who had read the books, and that immediately meant assignments were coming my way. I was still having a tough time breaking into the industry at that point, so the fact that I was looked at for Hunger Games content and then more YA content and then everything beyond it, that movie was a pretty big game changer for me. I also have the movie The Conjuring here because you guys know how much I love horror, so it really excites me and it kind of does mean a lot to me when I see a movie like The Conjuring that isn't just a good horror movie, but a good movie overall with qualities that let it get well beyond the horror community. So when a movie like that came out, it was my favorite movie of 2013, and I was able to share that love with so many people. That was a really exciting summer for me. Let's move on now to the movie Brooklyn. I have mentioned this before, but Brooklyn came out right around the time that I was considering making the move to LA, which was a very, very scary thing for me, in particular, leaving my family. My family's in New York. The West Coast was a very, very long ways away, and that movie kind of just gave me the encouragement that I needed. It was one of my favorite movies of that year as well, but specifically when it came to the move, I found that movie very, very inspiring. And speaking of inspirational movies, you guys knew I was going to mention Brittany Runs a Marathon. We're talking about a movie that encouraged me to sign up to run a marathon. I mean, that movie defined 2019 for me. There is no doubt that that was my biggest accomplishment of the year, and I don't think I ever would have signed up for it had it not been for that movie. And then that movie also came in handy all throughout my training when, I was down and I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to do it. I would just put on that movie and get all new motivation. And even though the marathon is done, I feel like no matter what your goals are, that's an inspiring movie that can get you to actually act and make a difference in your life and achieve something you really want to. So even though the marathon's done, I could still use that movie going forward to accomplish some other things in my life. Next question here is from Luke, who wants to know, who is your MVP of the decade for the movie industry? Great question, Luke. No way I'm coming up with one MVP, though. I've got a little bit of a list here, and I'll kick it off with James Wan because we already brought up The Conjuring, and I'll kind of repeat what I said, too. As a horror lover, I love seeing movies that really appeal to the horror-loving community, but I also love movies that break out beyond it, and James Wan has done that time and time again. I mean, you could think of things like Insidious, and we also now have the whole, not just The Conjuring, but the whole Conjuring franchise. He just keeps delivering. I can't wait to see Malignant next year. But then also look at what else he's achieved over the last decade. He not only made some great horror movies, but he himself as a director stepped well beyond the genre as well with Furious 7. That is a huge, huge undertaking. It was a big leap for him as far as the scale of the production went, and he knocked it out of the park. Another thing I really admire about James Wan is that not only is he a great director, but he's also a very talented producer too, and he's using kind of the name value he's gained for himself in order to get other movies made for up-and-coming filmmakers that might not have been made otherwise. So I applaud him, just like I applaud Guillermo del Toro. I mean, look at what he's doing right now. Of course, we had The Shape of Water, which was a huge success last year. But even beyond his work as a director, he does what James Wan does too. He produces movies for up-and-coming filmmakers. The most recent example that comes to mind is Scary Stories. Andre Overdahl is on the rise, and hearing how excited Guillermo was for Andre's success, I don't know, just kind of warmed my heart. And his work and his influence bleeds out into so many different sectors. Troll Hunters is a great watch on Netflix, not just for kids. I think it can appeal to a viewer of any age out there. It's colorful, it's vibrant, and I just think it speaks to Guillermo del Toro's incredible skill set when it comes to building really vibrant, exciting worlds that draw you in. So check out, I mean, really anything he touches for that matter. I also have to include Kevin Feige on the list. I mean, look what he has accomplished with the MCU over the years, culminating, of course, with Avengers Endgame, which, I don't know, it kind of seemed like an impossible task to bring all those films and all those characters together in a really satisfying manner, and he did it. So Kevin Feige's on my list. And, also just to name drop a couple of rising directors that I really am excited for in the past decade and can't wait to see them grow beyond what they've already accomplished. Damien Chazelle, Jennifer Kent, Robert Eggers, Destin Daniel Cretton, Ari Aster, there's so many more. I want to keep name dropping people though. I have to shout out Timur Bekmambetov. I'm always applauding someone who is introducing new technology into the industry, and his initiative with Screen Life I find really interesting. I mean, in a sense, it's almost like found footage. I think it's going to catch on like that, but being able to tell stories from that perspective, it's just such a promising format. And with the app that he's developed, it gives up-and-coming filmmakers with limited resources out there the opportunity to tell their own stories through that format, but without having to find a crazy amount of financing. One other shout out I want to give here is to Shudder. So I know streaming services have become the hot topic over the past couple of years especially, but Shudder is one of the ones that I admire the most of the bunch. Just seeing the library that they've accumulated from older horror movies to some of the newer releases, they really have a little bit of everything, and everything as far as subgenre goes too. They have monster movies, they have slasher movies, you name it. If you love genre, they've got something for you. And I also just get the feeling that that library was curated with so much love. It's a crazy thing to say, but I could kind of feel it when I scroll through their menu, and I really appreciate that. I am a loyal Shudder subscriber, and I couldn't be happier about it. Next question now is one from Billy, who's asking, if you could pick only one film from the past decade to watch in theaters again, what would it be? I am going to try to play by the rules with this one, because if I could only pick one, only one, and no other, I would go Mad Max Fury Road. That was one of those movies where, I don't know, my mind was just blown the first time I saw it. I'm not the biggest Mad Max franchise fan. I didn't think I wanted another installment of that series, but I was just riveted on my first viewing on the big screen. And I have seen it many times since, but that movie in particular is one of the best of the year as far as seeing in a packed house, a big gorgeous screen, booming audio. I would really love to see it in that format again. And who knows, I probably will get the opportunity in the near future, because retro screenings are happening all over the place, and I'm sure someone's going to queue this one up in the near future. Just to throw out a couple of other ones, The Favorite is another one I'd really love to see on the big screen again, because of just like how beautifully shot it is with the incredible production and costume design. It's just so detailed. I also never did see Free Solo on the big screen. I loved the movie. It was one of my favorites of last year, but that's one that I kind of regret not having gone to a screening early on, because that one on the big screen, I can't even imagine, but I want to be able to experience. And last one here is Snowpiercer. I did get to see it on the big screen the year it came out, but ever since, I've been watching it over and over on my iPad, on my TV, you name it. I've seen it more times than I can count, but I really do think the big screen experience enhances it even more. And I kind of wouldn't mind going and seeing that with a midnight crowd at, I don't know, like a Fantastic Fest or something like that. I really loved that movie, and I think a lot of the visuals lend itself to being projected in the large format like that. So Snowpiercer's on my list too. We got one more question to hit here, and this one's from Ian, who just wants to know the best villains of the decade. Let's get the obvious pick out of the way first. It's Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. I've seen the movie quite a few times since catching it for the first time at TIFF, and even at that first viewing, I knew Joaquin Phoenix was exceptional, but every single time I watch it, I am just more and more wowed by his performance. But a big part of the reason why this Joker makes the list is because the evolution of his arc throughout the movie, it is just so wildly disturbing. And I actually found it even more upsetting the second time around, when I knew what happens to him, and I could start to see the seeds that were planted early on, and then just how his circumstances, everything happening around them makes them kind of grow in a really violent, disturbing manner. That arc really just, it got under my skin and it's stuck in my head and it's not going anywhere. I also want to shout out Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. As someone who studied journalism in college and then went on to get my first job in local news, it freaks me out that I can understand where he's coming from. And I think that's a quality that I really admire in most of these villains that I'm going to name, is when they are the villain and they're doing bad things, but you can understand the source of motivation. You know where it came from. You know what's driving them to do those things. And that's definitely the case with Lou Bloom in Nightcrawler. I'll also put Kylo Ren on the list. I do think that, they didn't really stick the landing with that character as well as I would have liked in Rise of Skywalker, but I still think it was a very successful arc for that character. And again, he was a very troubled individual who had gone through a lot, and the 3 movies made me understand why he turned and why he made certain decisions. And when you look at what Adam Driver brings out of that character, I think that's actually probably one of the best examples I could give of an actor taking what's on the page and making even more of it. So Kylo Ren is definitely on my list here, and so is Koba in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I love how they kind of teed it up in Rise, and then he really flourished as a villain in Dawn. But that's another example of a character where I think the reasons why he does such terrible things is so well established that you believe him, you understand him, maybe you don't agree with his choices, but you know where he's coming from, and it makes it even more frightening. Also, a big shout out for Toby Kebbell for his performance capture work in that role. I think it's exceptional. And finally, I have to name drop the Babadook here. So the Babadook is certainly one of the best horror movie villains we've got all decade. And the thing that I love so much about that character is it plays very, very well in that particular movie as it pertains to those 2 characters, or mainly Essie Davis's character. But it's the idea that we all have a Babadook inside of us and we all need to figure out a way to live with it. That's something that kind of gets under your skin and never leaves you after you've seen it. And that's certainly the case with that character and me for the past decade, and now well beyond it too. There it is. That's the Q&A episode. That's my best of the decade Q&A episode. Another big thank you to all the fine folks who sent in these questions. Evan, Luke, Billy, and Ian. Thank you guys again so much for supporting the campaign. Means a lot to me. Big thanks to everybody out there. I do believe this is the last video I'm posting in 2019. So a very happy, healthy, safe new year to all of you, and see you in the new year.